Today I've been asked to share my story with you. It's a story that I hope you'll learn something from. At the very least, I hope it's a story that inspires you to make a commitment to, or to renew your commitment to living a life of ethics and integrity at all times and in all places, now and in the future, personally and professionally, but especially in the workplace. My story is a story about fraud and the real and actual costs associated with breaches of fraud and ethics in the workplace. So once upon a time, I was a somewhat ordinary woman, a wife, mother of 4 children, living the life that I'd always dreamed of. It was a life of financial prosperity and a lot of happy family memories, until unexpectedly, in one moment, my entire world collapsed, the result of something that I never ever had imagined would be a part of my life, and that is fraud. Fraud due to a serious breach of ethics and integrity on behalf of my husband. I can't express to you how far outside the realm of possibilities I thought an experience like this was for me, and it reminded me again, never think it can't happen to you. Which made March 18th, 2009, even more shocking when my husband sat me down at a kitchen table and uttered the words I'll never forget. My company, Market Street Advisors, is a sham and has been from the very beginning. I've actually been running a Ponzi scheme. Ponzi scheme? At the moment, I wasn't even too sure what that included, but I knew it wasn't anything good. And he confirmed my suspicions when he followed up that information with the following. He told me that 2 days earlier, he had hired an attorney and confessed his crimes to his lawyer. That the next day, accompanied by his attorney, he had confessed his crimes to representatives of the United States federal government, the U.S. Marshals, and that they had all given him until that morning, at that moment, to tell me. I'm happy to confirm that the wife really is the last to know. My husband then told me that he anticipated being formally charged within a week, being sentenced within 6 weeks, and being taken into custody to serve an approximate 5 to 7 year sentence in federal prison within a short period of time. Federal prison, I cannot describe to you how my mind reeled and the shock and horror I felt to know that anyone I had any connection to would be heading to prison. I had never anticipated knowing anyone who ever did anything more illegal than speeding. I certainly never expected knowing anyone who was in prison. But it got worse, much worse than just going to prison. My husband told me that I was now on my own to provide for and raise our 4 children. That all of our assets, our home, our cars, our savings, our investments, any property, any retirement, everything of material value that we had acquired in the nearly 20 years of our marriage was gone. That all of our assets had been frozen and were scheduled for seizure by the federal government. And that I needed an attorney, even though I'd done nothing wrong, even though I'd never even known anything illegal had been taking place. And the best part, that even though he'd known I would need an attorney, he had maxed out all of our credit cards paying for his. Sorry. So there I was, completely alone, with 4 kids and nothing, absolutely nothing. Not a job, not a roof over my head, no money, no prospects. My parents were dead. I needed an attorney. I was facing who knows what, and I didn't have a dime to pay for any of it. I finally understood what mind-numbing means. Incomprehensible shock, grief beyond description, horror to the point you almost can't think or feel or function, and incredible fear. I felt like I'd been thrust into the deepest, darkest, blackest pit I could never have imagined in my worst nightmare. And suddenly and sadly, it was my actual real life. Within days, U.S. Marshals appeared on the scene in their dark SUVs with tinted windows, wearing their FBI and U.S. Marshals glasses and firearms. Yes, I can confirm it's exactly like it is on TV. They entered my home, inventoried its contents, and prepared lists of assets for seizure. The media, tipped by angry victims, began calling and soon broke the story and surrounded my home and family with their satellite trucks to broadcast the story nationwide. Neighbors said and did absolutely hateful things to my husband, the criminal, but also to me and my children, accosting us, stalking us, verbally assaulting us. One victim even made it to the front porch of my home with a loaded gun, ready to blow Sean Merriman and who knows who else away before he came to his senses and turned around and went home, thankfully, before hurting any member of my family. Others broke into our home one night when they thought no one was home. Unfortunately, my 13-year-old daughter was there alone, forced to hide under our piano in a dark room as she texted for help. And thankfully, the help arrived and the intruders fled before she was discovered and harmed. As a result, even though my daughter ended up being safe after the break-in, my 3-year-old developed an intense phobia of bad guys, of home invasion, of darkness, of being alone, even in a bathroom, and began urinating in trash cans, on floors, anywhere but a bathroom, due to his intense fears spawned by those who had broken into our home and terrorized his sister. That fear was an everyday battle that lasted several years. By age 6, he was still afraid to go upstairs alone or into dark rooms, but at least he was using bathrooms properly again. By age 10, he was still afraid to be home alone. And because his daycare ended at 5 p.m. and I usually didn't get home from work until 5:20 or 5:30, I'd arrive home from work every night, rain or shine, 100 degrees or 10 degrees, to find him huddled outside on my front porch because he would not be in the house alone. And now, at 11 years old, he still prefers to sleep on the floor next to my side of the bed every night. Just one consequence resulting from his father's crimes. Think about it. Would you ever want to damage anyone to that degree through your actions? If you fail to live ethically, if you abandon your integrity, if you indulge in fraud or other misconduct in the workplace, you just might. So, what does all of this have to do with you? I can only imagine what you might be thinking, because until 7 years ago, I was just like you. You believed nothing like this could ever happen to you. And for most of you, I think you're absolutely right. And for a few of you, I think you're probably right. But look around you. Statistically speaking, someone in this room will perpetrate fraud or have a breach of ethics, integrity, or misconduct in the future, because research shows fraud and ethics violations occur everywhere in every organization. So how does it happen? How do decent, talented, likable, good people become criminals? I was interviewed by MSNBC's American Greed a few years ago, and they basically asked the same thing. How does it all begin? How does crime happen? How does a person commit fraud? How does a Ponzi scheme start? How does it all begin? My answer is somewhat lengthy and slightly more complicated than I ever imagined it would be, because I've learned for myself that not every criminal is a monster. Not every criminal begins as a bad guy with the intent to commit a crime. I think sometimes, without a lot of thought even, someone gives in to an impulse or a temptation in the moment without considering what the long-term consequences might possibly be. I think other people get caught up in greed, the fast track to more and more and more. They're always on to the next bigger and better deal, or paycheck, or accolade, or promotion, until they end up somewhere they never ever imagined they would be. Possibly others are looking for a shortcut to a promotion or professional success. But the reality is there are no shortcuts to anywhere worth going. Others may adhere to the worldly philosophy that has come to be known as situational ethics, where right and wrong are adjustable according to your situation or circumstances. P.S. I don't believe in situational ethics. Or maybe some people simply make a mistake and they don't know what to do, so they don't fix it. Maybe they ignore it or hide it and go on as if nothing happened. Or maybe they make a mistake and try to fix it and fail and try to cover it up as they go on and continue to seek to solve the problem. But by then it's too late. The moment you ignore, attempt to disguise, ignore, try to hide, or any other of those types of actions is the moment your fraud begins. You've crossed the line ethically, you've begun your fraud, and even if you're later able to fix your mistake, you've still committed the fraud and will be prosecuted when it comes to light, even if it's years later. So what do? Mistakes, failures, we're all human, so we're all going to have them. I guarantee if you've never made a mistake in your profession, you will at some point in time, because mistakes happen. But the important thing to remember is that mistakes do not have to result in crime. How you respond when you fail will ultimately determine how well you succeed. So if you handle your failures correctly and use them to become better and even to become great at what you do, they don't have to destroy your personal or professional lives. So when you make a mistake or fail at something, admit it quickly, correct it, get help, learn from it, and begin again with honor. I don't believe there is any shame in making a mistake or in having a failure. But I can tell you of the shame, humiliation, grief, loss, sorrow, destruction, and every other dark and terrible thought or feeling that comes from failing to own a mistake or a fail, and which very possibly can lead to fraud or prison. I also don't believe fraud takes place in one moment. I don't believe you go from being a 100% honest person of integrity to the perpetrator of a fraud or a crime in the next. There have to be secret slips, things that you might hide, things no one knows about until you are so far off course it becomes your reality. Dieter Uchtdorf, the former chief pilot of Lufthansa Airlines, taught that small errors can have a dramatic impact in our lives. He related it to flight, but I think it applies to business as well. He asked, suppose you took off at the equator to circumnavigate the globe, but your course was off just 1 degree. By the time you circled the globe and returned to the same longitude, how far off course would you be? 1 mile, a few miles, perhaps 100 miles? Wrong. An error of only 1 degree will put you almost 500 miles off course. The difference of a few degrees may seem minor, but even small errors over time can make a dramatic difference. And just as there are times in every lives, there are seemingly small matters that turn out to have enormous consequences. So with every situation, personally or professionally, it's critical to make those early and decisive corrections the moment you make a mistake or a slip. Don't wait or hope errors will correct themselves. They don't. So, how do you avoid getting off course? I believe, like everything else, you decide in advance that you are never going to commit fraud, that fraud is a line you'll never ever cross, and you hold to that commitment. Carl Mazer, the founder of Brigham Young University, said, "Place me behind stone walls, walls of stone ever so high and ever so thick, and there is the possibility that I might escape. But stand me on that floor and draw a chalk line around me and have me give my word of honor that I will never cross that line. And can I get out of that circle? No, never." Think about that. Think about the power of a line. a line that you will never cross, a boundary that will keep you safe and happy and at peace and free, and a host of other good things that you can't put a price on. I hope you'll each take the opportunity today to draw a line in the metaphorical floor of your lives, a line you decide that you will never, ever cross, and that line is fraud. And then I hope that you hold to that decision no matter how hard and no matter the temptation. No matter what, you've got to stay on the straight and narrow path of ethical behavior, which, by the way, I believe is no exaggeration. I think it's a narrow path, and when you start messing with the boundaries of it, you're very quickly into gray and questionable areas. And when you step off that clearly defined ethical path, it's a very slippery and surprisingly short fall to the mists of darkness and impropriety. I think you've also got to keep your heart in the right place. Things are just that, things. You can't take it with you as the truth. There are no hearses with U-Hauls. Don't sell your souls for worldly success and material privileges. So above all, choose ethics and integrity. Aspire to them. Choose to be a professional that exemplifies ethics and integrity. And while I believe that ethics and integrity in the workplace is a very challenging way to conduct yourself, I believe it is possible and even vital and necessary to have as a skill in your professional toolbox. I know that ethics and integrity are the way to protect yourself from fraud and the horrifying consequences that come to every life that is touched by breaches in ethics and integrity. Thank you for listening. Are there any questions?